Welcome to The Notice, a podcast from OTAVA with hosts TJ Howski and Melissa Locke.
All right, I want to welcome Yves to the podcast. He is our strategic partner, our first strategic partner to join the podcast. We're super thrilled that you were able to join us and the schedules worked out. I want you to just kind of start by telling us a little bit about yourself, personally and professionally, and then about Comdivision.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. My name is Yves Sandfort. I'm the CEO and founder of Comdivision. I actually founded Comdivision back in '96 already with a colleague. He then later on decided to go in other directions. But from our initial business of being a data center and services company, we focused out that being in the architecture and IT services space makes far more sense for us. And then over the last couple of years, that developed even stronger towards an area where we said is like an area where we are really good in is actually helping service providers, MSPs, and other people actually designing, like the dream they want to have to build something for their customers, and also sometimes be a bit of the devil's advocate and actually tell people is like, yeah, you can do that, but there are 5,000 other people who do exactly the same. Do you really want to be 5,001, or shouldn't we actually come up with a different business plan? So that's also what I like about my job is it's no longer just tech. It's actually far more also having business discussions, having discussions about how to grow and really build something out of it.
Nice. Tell me a little bit about you.
So I am a father of two kids, and with that being said, one of them is 2, the other one is 6. My wife does not only try to keep the kids busy, but also keep our corporate finances and everything in place. So whenever actually I'm doing any of these wonderful customer events or something like that, actually I get beaten up twice for it, for not inviting her in the first place, and then actually for her to having to manage the bill about it. But no, it's really, we are a family business. So from that perspective, we have a lot of people also come by for us because we are otherwise a completely remote company. And so remote is also kind of my life. So pandemic has changed everything. Before the pandemic, I was basically on the road 3 weeks, months in most cases. Then we had a pandemic. And since a few weeks, I'm more or less back to being on the road 2 or 3 weeks a month. But I love the travel. My wife and my kids are used to it by now. And so it's an interesting life, but therefore I see many different cultures and companies around the globe.
2 small children and you run a business. Doesn't sound busy at all. Not a lot going on.
No,
amazing.
Just sitting around, doing nothing, right? So, but to your point, she helps you run the finances. She obviously helps you run the home, and then you get in trouble when she sees the bill for all that you did when she didn't get to go hang out with you.
Understandable.
So I can't cheat anything with just using my business credit card or anything else. There is nothing where I get away with either private or business.
Sounds like you are sharpening your consulting skills at home.
Yeah. So beside that, the one thing which a lot of people know me about is I'm actually always running around in scarves. That's not working for those who are actually going to just listen to it. But it's typically when you see me without a scarf, I'm typically undercover. So that's it has become on larger conferences a bit of a running gag. I had discussions with other also sales leaders from different large scale vendors where there were even discussions on stage whether they had more shoes than me, different scarves and things like that. So that has developed over the years. And the other thing which I do really more like a hobby, but I can actually use it as my job for my job as well, is I have a pilot's license, so I can actually fly myself. I'm not using that to the US for sure, because in a small plane that would be just ridiculous. But a lot of my trips in Europe, I'm actually flying myself.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
So note to self, next year's budget, I'd like to take flight training so that I could start to work on that. That's pretty awesome, Yves. I did not know that. That is really cool.
And order an OTAVA scarf.
OTAVA scarf.
I have to add that to his collection. So what made you decide to start Comdivision?
Basically, it really makes you always feel old when you talk about that. But when we did that, now 27, 28 years ago, there was still, at least in Germany, the starting phase of the internet. And the good friend back then, who started the company with me, his father had an ad agency, and so they wanted to build web pages in the early days. So when we were talking about web pages, that was basically still, hey, can we really afford to put this image on there? It's going to be large, and large meaning a few hundred kilobytes. And so that was where we kind of started with. And for me, it was when I finished school. I tried to actually find or try to find education in IT, and back then it was actually still very difficult. And majority of the options were more or less, I started with a company and actually started as a trainee there, and figured out that after a very short time that actually I already knew more than the guy who should train me, and therefore I was more doing window cleaning and everything else. So I decided maybe it's the time to do that. But my parents had their own company and everything else, and so then it was more in the nature of me in actually starting my own company by itself, which always leads to the fact that people come and say, it's like, yeah, if your parents were already having their own company, so it must have been easy because you got capital and you got everything else. And believe it or not, the most people who I know also who actually come from a entrepreneur's a family or something like that, all of them tell you the same story. There was no money. There was no assistance. It's like, you actually, here is $500 or something like that. Go figure out yourself. And by the way, from these $500, you also need to figure out how to live. If you decide that you want to do that, but do it the same way as we did it. And as much as I hated them for that over the years, I also must say by now it's like I can actually say it's all mine. I did it all by myself. I created it all by myself. And the worst case, the only people I have to thank for is sometimes some banks who gave us money at certain points to actually grow to the next stage. But so that's a good thing, because it also, there is no safety net from that perspective. And I think that's sometimes when you build a company, that's an important part, because when you do not have a safety net, it needs to work. There is no plan B or C or something else. And this is also when I work with startups in the Bay Area or anything else. It's like sometimes it's interesting when you talk to founders and you have some who come up with a similar storyline and basically say, it's like, yeah, this is my only plan. This needs to work, and I will make this work. And that is much more likely to get any kind of funding, mentorship, or anything else than if you have these who basically explain you in the second sentence is like, yeah, and if this doesn't work out, I have this, and I have my retirement funds, and I want to have high risk capital from you, but I'm not going to touch any of the money which I have on my account. And I go, it's like, so you basically want to have a hell lot of money from me or from others, and you're expecting us to take all the risk. And that doesn't really sound very compelling for us. But yeah, so been there, done that quite a few years, have been involved in several startups, but I'm actually more happy now that I'm more on the mentorship side and not actively, because Comdivision keeps me busy in growing. The kids want to have some daddy time as well. And so I stepped back a bit out of the being startup in the startup scenario as well, just being the mentor from time to time for some, but that's all.
It's awesome. Yves, do you find you've been doing this for, a long time now, and what a lot of people may not know is that largely you've been centering in on cloud technologies, right? So over the last several decades, whereas some people tend to gravitate away, right? They start in one area and kind of pick up a lot of other pieces. I would say, from looking as an observer outside in, and then developing a new relationship, a new friendship, and getting to learn more about you and your approach, you've stayed very focused on, hey, even in entrepreneurial spirit and even in all the things that we're doing, cloud expertise and taking the complex and making it less complicated and helping people be successful in this area. You need to talk a little bit about that, because there's a difference between being an entrepreneur all over the place and being a focused entrepreneur to create outcomes. And I think that that's what you've proven is over 30 years, you have, Malcolm Gladwell's rule, right? Like 10,000, you've absolutely, honed your craft to create the success that you are today.
I think the big point is when you look at it now, it looks like it's always a straight line. But reality is when we also look at it is like when we started, we had data centers, you had remote access capabilities and things like that. But really over that time period, 25, 30 years, it's basically where the bits and pieces developed and became cloud, became something else. I remember when we started back in the days with these web services, we were one of the first to actually rent software. Now it has a term. It's software as a service. I remember where Salesforce came out and they were actually running around with their big no software sign all the time. They even had people running around in costumes like that at their conferences and things like that. So I would say in this industry, yes, we are talking about now that it's cloud technology, but in reality, when you look at IT always is in waves. We have things where it moves more near to the user because we have new technology, new things, and just based on that, we haven't fully developed the technology yet. We need to have it as near to the user as possible. And then once it evolves further, we actually push some of that back into a data center. And then we need to figure out how to manage that over there. But that all turns in circles. And you can take that back until old days with IBM mainframes and stuff like that and green screen computers. All of that is basically the starting line for the cloud. And is cloud the end product? Is like currently everybody is trying to figure out is like, how do we deal with AI and ML and everything else? And that to a certain degree is also cloud. But let's face it, that's also just a workload. It's in the end, right, whether I run, and it's interesting that people find new categories for everything all the time, is it's still running on infrastructure. So someone needs to provide infrastructure, right, whether you call it cloud, whether you call it outsourcing, managed hosting, no matter which title you want to give it, it's still a computer somewhere in a data center, whether it's on-prem or not. And we see other developments as well, where you have service providers who actually operate similar to AWS Outpost and things like that, who operate that infrastructure on-prem at the customers. So it's all of this is actually, and this is where you can perfectly well see is like things move out of the data center, move back in. It's this constant pendulum which goes left and right. And so that's where I would say is like, yes, it's a constant development and you constantly need to learn how things have evolved from physical into virtual. About a few months ago, I held a keynote at a service provider conference in Europe where I said, it's like, look, 20 years ago, we had the discussion when someone became a service provider or hosting provider or whatever, that they owned the data centers and all the infrastructure and everything for it. Then over the last couple of years, at least for smaller ones, they figured out that it is actually a better way to rent yourself into something. And by the way, talking about smaller ones, even Google, Microsoft, and the other ones are doing that in certain areas. If they don't know if they want to stay there, they first rent themselves into a different data center. And we are now basically seeing from an industry perspective the next level of development, because now the question is, do I really rent a cage or a room in a data center, or isn't the next phase that I'm going to rent compute power from whoever is going to be the data center and I'm adding a service on top of it? So again, it's basically every 5-10 years, it's like we push the layers down, but still the layers are still existing. You still need physical cablings. No one has figured out how we can actually do high performance networking over Wi-Fi, especially in a data center. You still need power. Still need cooling. You still need all these things. Nothing has really changed in that area over the last 25 years. It's basically what's running on top of it is going to constantly change.
Yeah, that's good feedback. It's fun, right? Like bell bottoms are back. It just kind of circles its way back through technology. But it is interesting, right? To that point, the more time that you spend talking to folks, it's easy to get caught with the new thing, right? So it's all of a sudden, most relevant conversation is serverless compute. But at the end of the day, you're still having to do the same things, which is what's your workload? Where are you running it? What are you trying to achieve? How much do you want to pay for it? But the underlay, we haven't really changed that much. We've added more to do more, right? But it's largely the same cycle. So it's good. It's good feedback. It's pretty cool to see. And I think it's introducing a new challenge though, that you're seeing, which is why Comdivision is so successful, right? So if you think about Comdivision helps serve the OTAVAs of the world as your customer base, and OTAVA is engaging the Comdivisions of the world for help, because what you're finding is, especially when you're talking about helping in a service provider world, every customer is different. What they have in common is they all have opportunities and they all have challenges. But at the end of the day, what they're trying to accomplish and the technology they're using, even if it's the same product purchased by 10 different customers, it's 10 different solutions because they have different goals and objectives that they want to accomplish. And so that's where you've got to try to find a way to make something less complicated, even though it's highly complex. And I think that what Comdivision has done really well is demonstrate that, hey, we can help you understand better, by asking the right questions and challenging, what are you really trying to solve for before you pick a technology and before you go down a certain, course and speed to deliver that, so that we can get to what's the end goal, which is what are you trying to achieve? And then we can marry all that together. And so we've really appreciated that. And I think you're spot on in the cycles of life that happen in the tech space. It's either going out or coming back in, but it seems to be pretty cyclical when you look at it overall.
And I think when we look at what you did, and as some might know, we are working together already now for I think 2 or 3. I think it's already over 3 years.
Yes.
When you look at that, really is one of the things which you did right, in contrast to others who are still on the learning curve, is we now get into the generation where we learn that IT is similar to building a house. And that's at least one of the comparisons which I always tend to use. And if you as a company or whoever wants to build a house, you're not actually sending your electrician back and ask him to go to the university and learn architecture and everything else. You are not using that knowledge often enough that it's making sense for you to have all of that in-house. It's like no one who just builds a building once a year actually hires 15 architects just for the fun of it, because it's better to know where the lines and everything is. It's like, no, that's where you have your people for. And that's exactly the same what we currently see in the IT, and we see more and more service providers like what we have done with you, who say is like, we need to operate this. We need to understand how it works. And that's still very important. But we do not necessarily need to design this. You are also not going back to the diesel generator company and actually try to figure out how you can build your own diesel generator or how you can build your own batteries for your UPS systems. You're utilizing what's already there. And I think that's exactly the point. And that's moving forward going to be for service providers really a differentiator, because that gives us the time that we can focus on trying to figure out what are new technologies, what are new things you might want to be interested in. And then we can constantly come back and actually say, it's like, this is how we could improve your building if we want to stay in the picture. And this is how we can actually evolve with new services, while you can stay and focus on your business in running this and operating this and solving your customers' problems, similar to how we solve your problems.
I appreciate that. That's really good insight. I had a call this morning is kind of relevant. So it was funny, but similar conversation with a third party in a different area of expertise. And as we were talking through it, they said, well, they were presenting all the cases as to why we should work with them. It's kind of funny, similar conversation. And of all the things that they presented, it partially aligned. We'll give them fairness. We won't mention any names. It partially aligned. But I said to them, do you actually understand the core business problem? And I'm having to sit on a phone call with you to talk to you about enterprise IT management with inside this organization to help. And I'm not talking about revenue, which means we're talking about the wrong thing. Like, how is this informing growth versus are we just talking about IT management, right? And so it is interesting. You're hitting the nail on the head that what you want in a strategic partnership, and what we see with Comdivision is, what can we offload to greater thought leadership that has more experience, that can create greater velocity through that partnership, so that you can get to the end game that you want better. And I hope that for every service provider out here that might plug in, you want to help more customers, right? That's ultimately what a service provider does. And if you're spending all of your time inwardly focused and you can't go out and help customers, then it doesn't matter how much tech that you've turned on and what you've built out, you're not able to go out there and make a meaningful impact. So we really appreciate that thought. we appreciate the partnership. And over the last 3.5 years, we've been able to create a lot of new opportunity, and we look forward to what's to come with it.
Yeah.
So that's great feedback. But all right, Mo, I derailed you. I know you got great questions. So what else you got for Yves?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about our values. And at OTAVA, our first value is people first, and our activities and decisions, tie back to these values. And you can almost say that our values are buckets or containers or Kubernetes.
Kubernetes.
I'm trying to be relevant here. So our people first,
well done.
Kubernetes. Why are people so important to your overall business strategy? I think we have some similar values. So just share a little bit about how the people, impact your business strategy and how you look at the people part of it.
I think when you look at it, especially what we do within Comdivision, in the end, a lot of the job tasks and job roles we have is nothing people can do just because they want to be cool or they just want to actually do it for the money. I mean, certainly we have applicants for that, but experience is also, they are not going to stay around long enough for us to really get anywhere with them. Because you really need to be willing to be constantly learning, because that's the other side of the story, where we help customers with all the knowledge and everything we have. That knowledge needs to come from somewhere, and that requires a constant learning exercise and everything else. And there is a lot of things we learn and we try out and we train on, which will never hit any customer. And so that is why I'm always saying it's important. You need to really be passionate about what we do and how we do that. And that on one hand requires a team which is passionate about that and really tries to do that. And that requires that everybody wants to work with each other as well. So that's also where you sometimes have to rearrange teams or other things. But the important part is for us is we really want to work because we have fun with it. It's and that's as cheesy as it always sounds, but that is a base requirement for the things we do. Because as always with some of these lives and some of these things, it looks nice from the outside. TJ has met Sasha as well. Sasha is by now actually traveling nearly as much as me, or in some areas even more.
Right.
It always sounds fun from the outside. It's like, hey, you can be in California, enjoy the sun, and I've seen you actually rented a convertible or something else. It's like, yeah, that is the only chance that I get some fresh air while I'm not sitting in an office meeting room or in my sticky hotel room. So that is where it looks from the outside completely different. And it's something where which only works when you have people who are really enthusiastic about what we do and how we do that, and also are fully behind our values and propositions. And one of them is, for example, is that we actually say is like, we want to be honest to the customer about what they need or what they don't need, which is also why we are in the happy position that for us, product revenue in regards to reselling products is an absolute minority of the business, because that allows us really in the end to not sell something which isn't needed or anything. We can be honest from a product perspective and from many other areas. And that is very vital for us from a culture perspective. And that is also a reason why certain people joined our team, because they were forced in other organizations by a sales rep who said, it's like, yeah, but you don't need to tell the customer that he really doesn't need that, because, hey, there is a bonus program on that specific spiff at the moment or something else. It's like, let's make sure that we get that into the door. I mean, there is a blurry line there, and I don't want to overstretch that, but I think it's important that we all in IT, that we don't run into a scenario that we feel like the cheesy car reseller, which has hundreds of cars, and no, this has never had any dent. And you look at the car, it's like, that clearly got actually a paint job done. But that's exactly the point. It's like, and then when you value these things, I think then you have a high chance to really build a great team. And the other part out of it is as always, if you work hard, you also need to party hard. And so from time to time, that's a requirement as well. And again, it's like, That would be sometimes when we look at some customers' compliance tables, if the customers would need to pay for that, that would never go through. But the point is, these are all very hardworking people, and it really depends on what people are working for. It's like next week, for example, we run a service provider workshop in Frankfurt, and I said it's like majority of the audience is more techies. Is like because they came up with a plan of a fancy meal, and I said it's like just throw a PlayStation in the middle of the room and actually deliver 15 pizzas. They are going to be more happy than with a 5-course meal where they actually are trying to figure out which fork is for which, and that's fine. It's like you need to take people where they are for what they are, and not actually try to do something just because it's fancy or because the person who actually runs the event just want to have a 5-course dinner. It's all about the people who are going to be there and how you actually join and enjoy all of this. And different people have different requirements, and that just needs to align. And we don't need to go completely overboard like what's going on sometimes in the Silicon Valley, where you actually get your car cleaned while you are working and you get your clothes cleaned and everything else. It's like, however, I see during my visit this week, actually, that starts to go down in some companies as well because it's no longer sustainable, I think. Plus, there is no one in the office anymore. So that's another change. It's like we have always been a 100% remote company. And for me, 100% remote company also means it's 100% remote. As long as we don't have any legal requirements for working on a government or public sector project where a person needs to be part of us or sitting physically in a specific space, let's not actually come up with a discussion if that's really a sensible decision, but they are living in that world still. I don't care if someone sits on a cruise liner and does his work from the cruise liner. It doesn't make a difference. It's like if he can pay the internet fees on the cruise liner, it's his problem. Then it's not my cruise liner internet fees. But that's the point. Is what does it make for a difference if I'm allowing people to work from everywhere? Is like then everywhere is everywhere. That does not require for them to sit in their home office and sometimes the work outcomes are much better if people are sitting completely somewhere else and have fun for a week. It's like it's their time. So that's I think is not only talking about benefits in certain scenarios, but really fully executing them in the end is clearly a factor out of it.
Yeah, I think you touched on every one of our values in all of that. You know, we win together. You know, it has to work for both of us. So be authentic, integrity, and culture of service. I think you touched on all of them. So that's awesome.
Yeah, but TJ now has the problem that half of the ops people want to work on a cruise ship next week.
yeah. Thanks for that. I'm gonna get 2 requests. Hey, can we change our value to be work hard, party hard, right? And can we get permission to work from cruise liners? Yeah. Oh boy, here comes those calls and requests. But no, I appreciate the feedback. I think you hit the nail on the head of what you're really saying in all of that is recognizing that there's an individual person, there's a human, participating in all of this, and to be able to get the most out of somebody. There's a lot that goes into that, but first and foremost is truly identifying what's unique to that particular person, what motivates that person, and how do we win together in that to most points. So it's really great feedback. And it's obvious, Yves, just in getting to know you over the time now together and that you have a heart for people and you built your business on that. And to use the word family business on the front as you started it, it's very obvious that who you are as a person, you've infused that into your culture. And spending time with Sasha and others, I can see how fun comes out. But I think that sometimes people misunderstand having fun does not mean you don't take it serious. It does not mean you're not a professional. It does not mean that you're well educated. It does not mean that you're not capable of delivering, but you are breaking the norm, right? And to be frank, in a world like it is today, I think I'd rather be weird than normal. So I'm going to go with weird over normal every day and twice on Sunday. And I'm going to submit for my pilot's license and change the value to party hard, work hard. I mean, work hard, party hard. Well, I guess I'll have to figure that order out there, Mo. But that's
first the work part, then the party. Otherwise, we tried it the other way around. It doesn't really work out very well.
Yeah. That's like, oh, that's college. You're not supposed to do that in the world.
And I
That's good
will
stuff.
tell you, TJ, you're really nailing the weird thing. I mean, you've got it. You've got that nailed. So you could probably stop working on that part.
You said bring your authentic self, so I was just like, bring the authentic self, right?
That's right. That's
Just
That's
right.
good
start with the
stuff.
next board meeting. Let's start with a party and not work.
I am absolutely sure that will go over really well. So it's good
All
stuff.
right. So you've partnered with us in our On the Road Again campaign. And so what value do you see getting back out in front of customers and spending time, just getting to know them? You're in California today, these meetings without sales pitches.
I think one of the main reasons why I like the campaign, and it kind of rolls back into what we try to train our people on all the time, is you really need to understand what the customer is working for, what's their target, because their target is, for the majority of customers, otherwise they would be service providers as well, is not running IT. Their business is something else. And it's always very important to fully understand what the customer, what really drives them forward, what are they looking for, because as soon as you know that, you can also help them really grow their business as well. As funny as it sounds, it's like we have spent far too much time in IT talking about ROIs and all kinds of things, versus just understanding what our customers want and why they want that. And once we understand that, we can actually work from there and really build a stronger future out of that altogether. And from my experience, it builds a much stronger relationship between a supplier and a customer if you really know each other. The other part is the last few years where we had a pandemic. We sometimes lost a bit track of the face-to-face contact, and I think it's very important. It's I think it's the challenge at the moment is trying to figure out what is the correct value, well, not the correct value, but the correct volume of one-on-one meetings. But it is required to really meet in person from time to time, whether it's with customers, with suppliers, with whatever else, and really having the time to talk about, hey, what's going on? It's like, where are we heading to? And not so much as like, hey, I brought this brochure about this wonderful new product. Don't you want to talk about that? But more really understanding what drives the other person, and that clearly can talk about a roadmap or something else. And I think that's why we were immediately in when we understood what this program is about. Is like, it kind of actually reflects exactly our same values and our same approach, where we say is like, it's very important that we all understand why we are in this game. As soon as we do this, we can actually win this together. It's like try to sell to a football player uniform or something else if you don't understand what he's going to do on the field. You might actually send him a cheerleader's costume. He will have a lot of fun with his team if he tries to actually win a game with that. But that's exactly it. If I don't understand, if I only know he's actually in that football organization, but I don't know if he's a player, a cheerleader, a judge, or whatever else, it's going to be hard for me to help him really come out as the best person whatsoever. And that's exactly where we need to be. Is like, we need to understand what customers really want and how they want it and why they want it. How can it be more successful for their business? And I think this is something overall for the IT industry where we completely lost plot over the last 15 years. It's so much about features and whether the LED is blue, green, red, or yellow, versus what is the business outcome out of it. And that's why I like it.
Home run, Eves. Home
That's
run. We're
right.
seeing the same thing, and I share the same passion that it's it's easy that like attracts like, right? So naturally, if you're in technology at some point in your younger years, you fell in love with it. And when you fall in love with something, you want to talk about that. And you attract other people that want to talk about that. And so you continue to talk about that without realizing that it's not really helping those people that don't understand it. And the responsibility is to bring value with what you understand to other people, and at the same time seek to understand what their needs are. And when you put the two together, you can create successful outcomes. You can change the perspective of IT being an operating expense versus IT being an enabling investment, right? There's things that it can do if it's done the right way. And so we've seen that in our on the road campaign. And for those listening, Comdivisions is partnering with us in this. And so we've been giving out gifts for time to our customers to say thank you as we spend time with them, to introduce that one of our strategic partnerships in Comdivision, and the reason that we're doing it is for that reason, which is, hey, first off, we all faced a pandemic. And we all are trying to figure out this thing called in-person meetings again. What's the right way to socially communicate, get together? Do we talk 6 feet apart or not, right? Like all the different things that kind of come into this whole figuring this thing out. But then as we start to really build that momentum again in what's the right cadence, what's the right volume, to your point, at the end of the day, you're trying to achieve one thing, which is how do we solve problems together? And we just happen to do it through technology. Other people do it through medicine or law or finance, right? And so we hope that that's the message that we're able to translate. So well said. I really appreciate that. It's nice to, get your perspective. So
yeah, I could totally, listening to him speak, I was like, I can see how you two connected. Like that was just, it's so similar. So yeah, that's good to see. Okay, now let's talk about what's going on in the industry. What's hot right now?
I think it's what's hot right now. I think AI is no longer hot anymore. I mean, everybody has figured out what ChatGPT can do, and that you no longer need to write your homework for your school anymore, and that there is a service for that. And I think that's perfectly fine. But I think we are all still in the beginning phase to trying to understand how these systems and services can actually help us and become better companies. I can fully understand why people are completely scared of these new technologies, but we also must say we are still miles or years away from the horror scenarios people are drawing up. Clearly, we need to be careful with that, like with any other new technology, on how we are going to use it and how easily you can trick them. We played around with one as well and got even, after a bit of messing around with it, one of the large manufacturers, LLM, to the case from first understanding us and one of our competitors up to the point that it actually, by influencing with it or asking the questions in the right way or in the way how we thought we could trick out the system, to the point that the competitor all of a sudden was a subsidiary of us. When you imagine these specific scenarios that you can influence these systems like you can influence a human being, I mean, in the end, we did nothing else, and it showcased how near these systems are potentially. We went in there and tried to manipulate the system. And I think when we look at it, what's currently hot is AI and ML is going to make our life a hell lot easier, similar to where we had things like Alexa and other things before. It's like nowadays, when you need something, you are no longer thinking about that. In which store could I drive to actually get that? In most cases, you go on one of the big shopping platforms, and one of them has enough favorites so that I don't need to call them out again all the time. But no, you go on a shopping platform or on a search engine and you search for it. And in many cases, you don't bother about going and buying it anymore. And I think that is just the next generation of things we are going to have. And where we all had the opinion when Alexa and Siri and all of this came out that basically what we are now getting with ML and AI would be there already. Reality is this whole scenario of voice assistants, it was nice, but it was very simplistic commands. Now that they are going to join these systems, we are going to see something interesting. And that's the point where I can potentially, and this is where we come back to our industries and everything else, where I can potentially then talk to the system and tell it is like, hey, can you review the OTAVA design for the XYZ data center? We need to make an adjustment and actually do the following things. And I can either talk to that system or actually write it in the chat window or however that's going to look like. And I was just on a conference where someone said, it's like, isn't that highly scary for you? Because you make a hell lot of business around writing designs and architecture in the first place. And I said, it's like, yes. And my grandfather was actually an architect who built churches and things like that. And he did that in handwriting without CAD or anything else. Is the whole industry gone away? No, you still have architects. Technology evolves. Things evolve. And I'm not writing anymore on a typewriter and have to actually kill myself for making 5 mistakes and having to rewrite the whole page again. things evolve. And the next generation in that specific scenario is going to be that we have systems which we can tell what we want and they will do something. How fast will we be at the point that we don't have to check what the computer does? Currently, I treat that more like my 6-year-old. I better actually read the homework again and just don't only believe that it has been done and that it has been fully done. So that's exactly the same. We have technologies which will help us a lot. And I think the next few years are going to be very interesting in that space to see what's coming. At the same point in time, that does not require that we need completely new data centers or something else, because in the end, it's still the same technology. And similar to where you said you have these codeless developments and all these kinds of things. In the end, when we think about that, BASIC was nothing different as a very basic programming language in the days, because it also only translates back into assembler in the end so that it can run on the CPU. And all of these new technologies are just abstracting layers. And AI ML is going to be, I think, the big thing in our industry in the next few years. But I think we are still far away from all the horror scenarios and everything else. It's very simplistic still. It can do scary things, especially when you look at images and things like that. But we also have a lot of things to clarify still. Is who owns IP? What is it if that AI/ML engine, if I look at it, ChatGPT actually was on our webpage and actually stole all our case studies and basically can now write its own case study out of it. Did we ever give it approval to do that? No. Is it our IP from a copyright perspective? Yes. If I can prove, so tons of things. So that's going to be interesting. I think we will see new devices also coming out, and that's going to be interesting. The way how people are going to access computers. Starting in January, I'm still trying to figure out which state I'm going to hit to buy my Apple glasses. And no, the point is, when you face it, it's like too many people are too focused on the fun use case of it. When you look at the business use cases for it, there is a huge use case for it. When you think about something very simplistic, I can foresee that potentially even airlines, it's going to be cheaper for an airline in first class or business class to hand out Apple glasses than building these TVs in the seats, which are horrible. They are small like this, have a horrible resolution. You can now put on glasses which basically have a full HD or a 4K screen resolution, and you can watch everything in real time, and you don't need to have a computer with you. So they are going to change a lot of things, and considering that you can use them for meetings and things like that, potentially I could, if I would have had that, I could actually walk around wonderful Bay Area and actually run the podcast with you in parallel, which is still, when you walk around with a mobile phone and AirPods, it's still an awkward situation. But we will see people run around with these weird glasses on and actually just walk through the park. And you never know what they are watching. Think about it.
You never know. And I don't know that I want to in some situations. But no, Yves, I think it's great feedback. I think it's interesting how cyclical innovation, right? How you watch things get invented, and I think we've exited this initial stage of innovation that is like, hey, we're gonna introduce a new concept in technology and AI ML, and a lot of people haven't realized that this is just a technology that has finally matured to a place in which it's generally available and more welcomed and understood and easy to interact with. What is highly complex has been made to be less complicated, that people can interact with it. And here we are 60 plus years into it, not 12 months, as some people would think with ChatGPT. And they're realizing, oh, wow, this is a really useful thing. And I think that's what you're going to see the most, in my opinion, next between AI and ML is human augmentation, where you're going to see a person that embraces AI and integrates it into their job, and a company that understands the ethical requirements and the obligations and those things to first create efficiencies in a business is going to allow for a much better work environment. If you can just think about how technology used the right way at the direction of what the human actually wants it to do, is going to be really, really powerful. And you can put a ton of value on top of that. And then you're going to get into the nuanced cases of where it's going to be, cutting edge and bleeding edge. And I think, to your point, there's a ways to go before we get into, sci-fi movie experiences that folks worry about and kind of forecast. But I think in current reality, when you can think about the efficiencies that you can create for folks, whether it's contract support, right, or understanding best practices and being able to pull recent best practices real time, or being able to get quick instructions on how to's and not feel like you're surfing all over for hours on end to find relevant, accurate information. There's a lot of really great things to come. And so hopefully people will learn to embrace technology the right way, not from a fear-filled perspective, but from a hopeful, excited perspective. And I'm certain that with your voice and my voice and others out there that are trying to encourage people to take it on for the right reasons, they'll be excited to go play with it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it scales and grows. So, well, Mo,
yeah,
you're on to your last and favorite question. This is one of your favorite questions.
This is my favorite question. So, when you're outside of work, what are you passionate about? What do you like to do in your free time?
In my free time, there are multiple things. So one of the things is I try to, and that's actually more my morning passion is trying to do some sports, which is really helping me. I always figure out when I'm traveling too much and I don't have the time in the mornings, how desperate I'm needing that. The other part is the short times at home, enjoying the playtime with the kids. And then clearly, I said it before. I did not make the pilot's license just for business reasons. I mean, it's a family tradition. My grandfather actually founded a first flyers club in our region. Then my uncle took it on, and I was just the next logical candidate. But from that perspective, I really enjoy that because it's giving you a different perspective, and it also links back to so many other things, and it gives you a certain set of freedom because I can basically get in a plane and get anywhere I want to be. I mean, not get anywhere. I mean, just quickly flying to New York doesn't work. I mean, it would be a multi-day trip. So, but other than that, it's for me that's a very, very important fact in just getting out of everything. And I still enjoy that there is no cell phone reception up there. They are working on all of that, but it's actually that's what I always laughed about a long distance travel is by the point in time I worked for a long period also in Australia, getting on a plane, getting everything turned off. And at one point in time, one of my mentors said, it's like, so what's the problem? Why do you need to get on a plane for that? It's like, should I show you? It's like, here is your phone. This is how you turn it off. And I looked at him like, as he actually showed me the holy grail of everything. But it's in the end, it's so easy. Sometimes it's like, yeah, let's just turn these things off and let's just turn all of these communication devices and everything off for a while. That's always also kind of my advice, which I always give to new people, which constantly keep looking at their phone or now their watches or anything else is the question which one of my mentors always said is like, as long as you're not a brain surgeon and no one is going to die if you're not answering your phone within the next 5 minutes, is like you can turn it away. It's like I can sit for dinner here in the Bay Area with people who run multi-billion-dollar companies, and they can spend an hour or two at a dinner without ever actually watching on their phone or their wrist for an Apple Watch or anything else. And I think that's an important lesson to look at. So use the time which you have for yourself very wisely and use it really for yourself, and don't become a slave to technology like what we all foresee what AI and ML are going to do to us at one point. But we are already slaves of our iPhones and everything else. Turn these boxes off, or at least figure out how to ignore them for a while.
Great advice.
Great wisdom, Yves.
Yes.
That is a great place to not ask any more questions. That's a mic drop moment. Well done. Appreciate that.
Thank you for your time today and for joining us.